The first night, nobody saw it as a real threat. Just a few faint noises along the edge of the garden. No heavy impact. No clear sign of a deliberate intrusion. By morning, a few crop rows were trampled, some plants pulled up by the roots. People looked at each other and shook their heads. Probably just a wild boar passing through. It'll be gone tomorrow. At that time, that assumption felt reasonable. But in hindsight, that was the first mistake, underestimating the risk. On the second night, the sounds came back. Not louder, not more aggressive, just familiar. By the third night, tracks covered the same path again and again. This was no coincidence anymore. A pattern had formed. So, what was done next? And did it work? Stay with us. Once the boars started hitting the edge of the land, people began taking turns staying up at night. Fires were lit, flashlights in hand, walking patrols around the fields, just to let the herd know, humans are here. But this kind of defense burns people out. Humans have to stay awake, eyes wide open, every single night. Wild boars don't. They can stand back, stay calm, skip a night, and simply wait for the moment when exhaustion creates an opening. And sooner or later, that night always comes. By the next morning, the damage was impossible to ignore. Fences pushed aside, crops destroyed across a wide area, tracks covering the entire field. The loss didn't grow gradually. It spiked, suddenly and violently, far beyond anything before. That's when the real problem became clear. It wasn't that the wild boars were getting bolder. They had just chosen the right moment. If this cycle continued, the damage wouldn't stop at a single harvest. After that night, everything changed. No more night watches, no more random chasing. Instead, a long-term decision was made. Stop reacting after the damage, and start controlling space and behavior. The enclosure trap wasn't built to confront the boars head-on. It was built to reshape their movement. Once behavior becomes predictable, space control becomes the key. Steel frames were connected into a closed enclosure, leaving only one narrow entrance. The trap wasn't placed in an open area or somewhere obvious. It was built directly on the herd's mandatory travel route, the path they had to take to reach their familiar food source. Every detail was calculated, hidden enough to avoid suspicion, strong enough to hold under pressure, and a mechanism that didn't rely on luck. Night fell, right on schedule. The same sounds came from the same direction. The herd appeared, just like every night before. No hesitation, no caution. After many quiet nights, they had learned this place carried no real risk. That familiarity made them predictable. When the entire herd was within the controlled zone, when there was no clean escape left, the system was triggered. No loud noise, no chasing, no chaos, and most importantly, from that night on, this area disappeared from the herd's return map. One decision, made at the right time, cut off a cycle that had lasted night after night.
Let's go. Hi.
After that night, the land went quiet again. No fresh tracks, no repeated destruction. Not because wild boars vanished completely, but because the balance had been restored. When space and behavior are controlled, conflict doesn't escalate. In conflicts between humans and wildlife, sustainable solutions don't come from instant reactions. They come from breaking the cycle, or damage becomes irreversible.
boars at this. Get on it. Up. Yep. Get on the truck. Yep. Fourth of July barbecue. All the little guys.
Mercy.
I didn't even film none of that either. That's a
Wild boars don't show up overnight, and not every trap is meant to catch as many animals as possible. Across the southeastern United States, many farmers have learned a hard-earned lesson. Harvest season isn't ruined by massive herds charging in overnight, but by the small signs that appeared days earlier. No long mud trails tearing through the fields, just a few scattered hoofprints along the field's edge. Enough for an experienced eye to know the herd is scouting, memorizing, and planning to return. Once that realization sets in, the question is no longer if the boars will come back, but how to control their behavior before real damage begins. That's the moment when calculated decisions start to matter. According to wildlife control data from the southern US, more than 60% of wild boar herds do not invade fields as a full group. Instead, they send younger or lower-ranking individuals first, testing for human scent, metal, and signs of disturbance. For farmers, this creates a critical choice. React too quickly, and the herd reroutes entirely, making control far more difficult for the rest of the season. The first trap isn't placed in the middle of the field, but along a narrow trail connecting the forest edge to the crops. Small in size, fast-dropping door, shallow bait. On the first night, only one boar is caught. In many places, that result might seem insignificant, but in wild boar control, this is the most important observation phase. After the trap is triggered, the herd shifts its timing and abandons the original route, a clear sign they've detected human interference. Two nights later, when the boars begin moving later than usual, a medium-sized cage trap is set where low pasture meets the forest edge, an area where the herd naturally slows down. Large enough for 3 to 5 animals, with bait pulled deep into the center. The trap activates at the right moment, but doesn't capture the entire group. Behavioral studies show that when part of a herd is taken, the remaining boars often alter their route and avoid the area for several consecutive nights. This allows the controller to reshape the herd's movement pattern instead of forcing direct confrontation. Only when food pressure pushes the herd back toward its original route does the large trap come into play. It's set after several nights of no intervention, minimizing human scent. Bait is spread evenly to keep the herd inside long enough. When the gate drops, the camera records multiple adult boars, including the dominant lead animal. U.S. feral hog control programs show that removing a lead boar can reduce re-entry into an area by over 70% in the following weeks. And just like that, the farmland stabilizes again, right up to harvest. Every year, wild boars cause billions of dollars in damage to American agriculture. But the greatest losses don't come from the number of boars. They come from poorly planned human reactions. In wildlife control, success isn't about using the biggest trap. It's about reading behavior and stepping in at the right time. When farmers understand that every cage is not just a tool, but a deliberate decision, they don't just protect their crops. They preserve the long-term balance of the land they live on. Wild boars emerge. They quietly cross the streets, pushing deeper into residential areas. They tear up gardens, search for food, and roam freely through places once considered safe human spaces. Videos recorded by residents reveal a troubling shift. Wild boars no longer stop at the forest edge. They now appear on city streets, inside neighborhoods, even right in front of people's homes. When the boundary between urban life and wildlife becomes blurred, the issue is no longer just property damage. It becomes a matter of human safety. When wild animals lose their fear of humans, risk begins to grow exponentially. This is not just a story about wild boars. These images raise a much larger question. How are we managing the shared space between humans and nature? And how can we protect our way of life while still preserving the balance of the natural world? Follow us as we continue this challenging journey. From before dawn, Martin, one of the most respected wild boar hunters in the region, was already at the trap site he had set days earlier. More than just a skilled marksman, Martin is known in the local community as a pioneer in using smart trapping systems to control wildlife safely and responsibly. Today's mission posed a serious challenge, a highly alert sounder of wild boar, and the team's responsibility was not to injure them, but to guide them back toward the forest without harm. The core strategy was pre-baiting, allowing the boar to become familiar with the trap site before any activation. The team used fermented corn and sweet bait, since wild boar find almost impossible to resist. Over several days, the entire sounder grew accustomed to the location and the food source, significantly increasing trap effectiveness while minimizing stress and panic. When the trap is finally triggered, the likelihood of capturing the entire group at once, rather than scattering individuals, makes the operation safer, faster, and far more efficient. Effective control does not come from haste, but from staying one step ahead. Martin uses Boar Buster, a modern trapping system designed specifically for wild boar and now widely deployed across the United States. Unlike traditional methods, Boar Buster allows an entire sounder to be controlled with a single activation, minimizing panic and greatly reducing the risk of boars scattering into nearby residential areas. For Martin, operating a trap is never just a technical procedure. Each activation is a responsible decision, tied directly to maintaining ecological order and protecting the everyday safety of the community. Before triggering the system, Martin carefully checks every factor: the trap's placement, the direction from which the boar approach, and the most appropriate moment to activate. Thanks to the pre-baiting process, allowing the boar to become familiar with the trap site over several days, when the entire sounder arrives, the system can be triggered with precision, keeping stress and unnecessary risk to an absolute minimum. Once the boar are securely contained, the team relocates them to a legally designated management area, ensuring the operation remains safe, controlled, and does not disrupt nearby residents. This is where technology, field experience, and patience converge. No rushed reactions, no loss of control, only proactive intervention to prevent damage, protect the community, and preserve balance within the local ecosystem.
Let's go, hip. Let's go, hip, hip. Get in there, hip, hip. Hip, 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 hip. Yeah, we gotta screw that to the bottom.
The operation didn't just bring wild boar under control, it restored peace of mind to families and the wider community. In a world where wildlife is increasingly encroaching on residential areas, smart, humane, and properly licensed solutions are the path towards sustainable management. Wildlife management is not a battle between humans and nature. It is how modern society brings together science, law, and responsibility to protect both communities and ecosystems.